Hi everyone, my name is Teo Andrade, and today I'm going to be doing my presentation on the thought experiment of Mary's Room by Frank Jackson, where Jackson presents an argument against any specific account of consciousness. This thought experiment explores a really deep question. Can philosophical science fully explain consciousness, or is there something extra, something about subjective experience that science can't capture? However, before we get into today's presentation, there are a few key terms that I would like to define to help us understand what this topic is about. First is physicalism, which is the belief that everything, including your mind, can be explained using physical science. That means physics, chemistry, biology, and neuroscience should eventually explain everything about us. The next one is qualia, which refers to the personal, subjective, what it feels like qualities of experience. For example, pain has a felt quality. So does the sweetness of chocolate. Qualia are not just data, they are the inner texture of experience. Finally, a thought experiment is a hypothetical scenario used by philosophers to reveal hidden assumptions or limitations in theories, even if the scenario isn't realistic or practical. With that being said, let's begin the presentation. Frank Jackson. Frank Jackson is an Australian philosopher born in 1943, influential in areas such as the philosophy of language, metaphysics, and especially the philosophy of mind. In 1982, he published papers defending a view called epiphenomenalism, the idea that mental states arise from physical processes but don't cause physical effects themselves. Mary's Room was designed to support this position. Jackson's argument became incredibly famous almost overnight. Philosophers, neuroscientists, psychologists, and even computer scientists spent decades debating it. Jackson later changed his mind, which we'll look at later, but the importance of the thought experiment survived the reversal. To understand why Mary's Room was so striking, we need to look at the historical debate it entered. For centuries, philosophers debated between subjects such as dualism, which is the mind and the body being different things. René Descartes believed the physical body was mechanical, but the mind was non-physical. Then there was materialism and physicalism, which everything is physical, but there is no mind stuff separating from the brain. In the 20th century, physicalism gained momentum because neuroscience made huge breakthroughs. Brain imaging technologies such as EEG, PET scans, and MRI demonstrated that thoughts correlate with neural activity. Many scientists began to assume that consciousness would eventually be reduced to brain data. Mary's Room challenges that assumption by suggesting something might be left out, specifically what experience feels like. Now let's introduce Mary. Mary is a brilliant scientist who specializes in the neurophysiology of color vision. However, she is trapped in a room where everything is black, white, or gray. Her textbooks, her screens, her clothes, all grayscale. She has never actually seen color before. But she studies color scientifically and learns every wavelength associated with red, green, blue, the exact neural patterns each color triggers, behavioral responses to color perception, how cones and rods process light, what happens in the visual cortex when someone sees red, and much more. Jackson claims Mary learns all physical information about color vision. One day, Mary is released from her black and white environment and sees a red apple for the first time. Now we are presented with Jackson's question: does Mary learn something new? If she does, then not all the facts about consciousness are physical facts. Jackson believes Mary gains new knowledge, something she could never get from scientific facts alone. She learns what redness actually looks like. This knowledge is not just data, it is experience. That difference is the entire heart of the debate. Qualia. Qualia are at the core of this argument. Examples of qualia include what spicy food feels like, what being dizzy feels like, what it's like to hear a violin, or what deep sadness feels like. Qualia are subjective. They can't be fully communicated or measured from outside. You might know scientifically how nerves fire when someone is in pain, but that doesn't tell you what pain feels like. Jackson says Mary lacked qualitative knowledge, and therefore consciousness cannot be exhausted by physical facts. Jackson's logic works like this. Before leaving the room, Mary knows all the physical facts about color. When she sees red, she learns something new. Therefore, not all knowledge is physical. Therefore, physicalism is incomplete. It's simple, but the consequences are enormous. What Mary didn't know. Imagine reading every book about swimming, muscle movements, water resistance, breathing technique, but until you get in the water, you don't know what swimming feels like. Similarly, Mary's knowledge was descriptive, not experimental. Science tells you how pain works, but you must feel pain to know its quality. Objection 1. The ability hypothesis. Some philosophers argue Mary doesn't learn new facts. She only gains new abilities such as the ability to imagine red, the ability to remember red, and the ability to recognize red visually. Abilities, they argue, are not knowledge about new facts. They are forms of skill. Jackson responded that experiences teach content, not just abilities. When you see red, you learn something about the world's experience. Objection number 2. Old facts, new mode. Another objection says Mary didn't learn a new fact. She learned the same fact in a new format. Think of learning your friend's voice scientifically versus hearing it. You aren't learning new information, just a new pathway to the same fact. Jackson disagreed, saying subjective feel is not just a new format, it's new content. Objection number 3. Perfect physical knowledge. Some philosophers argued the scenario is unrealistic. If Mary truly knew all physical facts, she could logically deduce what red looks like. This position claims physical facts are enough. We just haven't figured out how. This is known as type A physicalism, the belief that consciousness can be fully explained by physical science, even subjectively. Objection number 4. Phenomenal concepts. This view claims Mary learns a new concept, not a new fact. She already knew all the physical facts, but lacked the conceptual resources to think about them in a first-person way. Seeing red activates new cognitive architecture, which allows physicalism to survive by saying that the world didn't change, Mary's way of thinking changed. Objection number 5. No qualia at all. This extreme position, defended by Daniel Dennett, argues Mary learns nothing new. He claims if Mary truly had perfect knowledge, she would already know what red looks like. Dennett thinks qualia are illusions. We make them up because consciousness is confusing. Most philosophers reject this view, but it highlights the spectrum of interpretations. Why it matters. Mary's room is often referenced in debates about consciousness, arguments about the soul, artificial intelligence theory, medical ethics and pain research, virtual reality engineering, sensory substitution research, and much more. With all of this in mind, it forces us to ask, can experience be reduced to data? A related idea is the inverted spectrum scenario. Imagine your red qualia looks like my blue, but we both call stop signs red. Behavior and language remain identical, but the experience differs. This supports Jackson by showing science measures behavior, but not an experience. Artificial intelligence. Mary's room matters for AI because if subjective experience requires qualia, then can AI ever truly see red? Can AI feel pain? Can AI be conscious? Physicalists say yes, anti-physicalists say no. This debate shapes how we treat machines. In VR, we simulate perception, but we cannot simulate qualia directly. We can manipulate pixels, but can we manipulate conscious experience? Mary suggests there is something fundamentally first person that cannot be externally installed. Pain research. Doctors can study pain specifically, but your subjective experience of pain can only be described from inside. This matters ethically. We treat pain seriously because qualia have normative weight. They matter morally. Mary highlights how science alone cannot capture suffering. Additional thought experiment, the bat. Philosopher Thomas Nagel famously wrote, "What is it like to be a bat?" He argues we can know everything about bat sonar scientifically, but we will never know the experience of ultrasonic perception. Mary supports Nagel. Jackson's reversal. In the 1990s, Jackson changed his mind and became a physicalist again. He said, Mary's realization is a new way of processing old facts. Neuroscience can eventually explain qualia. Subjective feel is brain activity. Why is this important? It's important because philosophers rarely abandon their most famous arguments. Jackson's reversal reinvigorated physicalist research. Why Jackson changed. Jackson argued later that our intuitions about knowledge are unreliable. Subjective experience might be physically reducible, and phenomenology can be captured by functional roles in the brain. He admitted the argument was persuasive emotionally, but incomplete scientifically. My evaluation. Personally, I think Mary learns something new when she sees red. Even with all the physical data, she lacked direct experience. Science gives third person descriptions, but consciousness is first person. You can't understand taste by description alone. That doesn't mean science fails. It might just mean experience is a distinct dimension we don't fully understand yet. Where I agree with Jackson where Mary clearly gains new knowledge, experience teaches something beyond data, and qualia matter more morally and practically, which suggests science needs new conceptual tools. I think that Mary being able to experience this firsthand, seeing red, is something that you can't give through any other sort of methods or ways. And through her being able to experience it firsthand, she's able to see something that someone who isn't in her position is able to see. And Mary being able to see the color red with her own eyes rather than something that she can only imagine or refer back to what she learned. And also this example goes hand in hand with being able to read about learning how to swim and learning all the foundations you need to be able to swim in water, but you actually don't know what it's like until you actually do it. And this is something that can go hand in hand with Mary seeing the color red, because it shows that there's much more than just learning from afar than actually learning in like hands-on in person. And Mary's doing that, which defers her experience from someone who may not be in her position. I disagree in when it comes to that. I don't believe that this proves physicalism is false. It only shows physicalism is unfinished. To conclude, Mary's Room is one of the most important thought experiments in the philosophy of mind because it exposes the tension between scientific description and subjective experience. It shows that physical knowledge may miss first-person qualities, qualia are philosophically powerful, experience teaches something science cannot capture, consciousness might remain partially mysterious, and even though Jackson eventually abandoned the view, the debate continues in neuroscience labs, philosophy departments, AI research centers, and cognitive science journals around the world. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.